special report on the importance of men serving in the church. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash, and joining me is co-host Margaret Colson and our special guest, Dr. Johnny Hunt, longtime pastor and evangelism advocate who knows a thing or two about reaching men for Christ. Dr. Hunt, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. My privilege.
Well, Dr. Hunt is a few days away from marking 30 years of leading a men's conference that draws thousands from around the Southeast every year. He started the men's conference not long after coming to First Baptist Church Woodstock, Georgia, as pastor in 1986. He served as pastor of First Woodstock for 33 years and now serves as Senior Vice President of Evangelism and Leadership at the North American Mission Board. He's also a former president of the Southern Baptist Convention and founder of the Timothy Barnabas Ministry for Pastors. But it's this men's ministry conference that we're interested in talking to you about today, Dr. Hunt. 30 years. You started it just after coming to First Woodstock, and from what we understand, you keep it a local church event. So tell us a little bit about how you've made this happen.
Yeah, well, when we started leading Woodstock, in the bottom of my heart, I knew that I would never see a ministry upon which the sun would never set without men being devoted. And, we cut up a whole lot about where would we be without the women. And it is so true. But we've just got to get our men engaged. And so I went on a fast thinking, God, what can I do? I was just really seeking the Lord. And I felt I'm going to do a men's conference. And I even said, I'm going to do it on Super Bowl Sunday weekend, Friday night and Saturday. And it just kind of lodged in my heart. And that's where it is. And they changed Super Bowl this year. So we're missing it by a week, but that's okay. So it doesn't interfere with the game ending
They did
on
that
Saturday.
for you, I think, right? They knew you were.
Exactly. Yeah, they changed it up to make mine a little better since COVID had hurt us so bad. But I made a statement, and I've used it every year. I'll use it this year, Lord willing. Men are the untapped reservoir of useful energy for the kingdom of God. And we all know that when a man comes to faith in Christ, 85% minimum, maybe as high as 87 or 88% of the family follow suit. And so the key to reaching a family is reaching men. And then, like I say, the women are doing a lot of spiritual nourishment. But boy, those boys and girls just, the family just follows suit when you got a husband that's leading the way. And so we've kept that pure all the way through. Now, being local church, I just challenged our men. But then men begin to invite their sons. Sons begin to invite their fathers. Men begin to invite their siblings. And then, guys, as you know, Atlanta being a melting pot, guys begin to say, man, I'm going to reach back to my church in Alabama and ask them to come. And so they started like, hey, here comes a carload. Here comes next year the van load. And now the parking lot's full of buses. So they begin to come. And let's go pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, 27 states were in the room. And then our simulcast, which we started with Lifeway, but then they chose to go a different direction year before last, which was a little unusual because we were making a lot of money. But anyway, but it's okay because now I do my own and I make all the money.
All right? That worked out for you, right?
It's fact. But I mean, each year the simulcast team will say, hey, Pastor Johnny, let's take a moment and welcome some people. And I remember year before last, the entire hangar in the Air Force in Hawaii, in Honolulu, were online with us. And, you can see them, we could throw it up. And it was just so encouraging to see, 100+ men in a hangar at the Air Force watching our men's conference. And, they just from everywhere. And so any person can put it up on a private computer, or they can throw it up on their TV and have their friends over or their children over, or a church. A church gets it and they pay based on the number of their attenders. So a church may buy it and they just say, here, we run 200, so here's what we pay, but they can invite anybody. They can invite the entire association. So even in COVID last year, about 5,900 men watched this. I like, we're always worrying about numbers. So I think it may be exaggerating. I said, I hope they are, because they pay me for each individual one. And if they're going to pay you, they're not going to exaggerate. And then in the room, even with COVID last year, it was a 2,000. But before I went to simulcast, I was averaging 12,000 men on campus. I had to do 2 weekends, and they always just balanced out. And then when I went simulcast the first year, it dropped to about 8,000. We seat 7,400 and we let them stand, or they could go to an overflow, but they didn't want to go to overflow. They wanted to be in that room, even if they had to stand up like on a third balcony. So the energy and the encouragement, and they experience revival in the room. They experience revival on their way home. Some of them come and rent places out by the lake and make it a whole weekend retreat and stay over and do their own Sunday worship, or worship with us and go do their own thing. It's just become somewhat of a little movement within itself.
Well, so much has changed over the past 30 years. It's hard to even wrap around our mind around how much has changed in technology, even in culture, just in the world. You've stayed true to the purpose of the event, but what changes? How have you adapted through the years?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is we've just tried to make it better. Say, for instance, I'll speak, but then there'll be 4 or 5 breakouts, like a leading psychologist dealing with major issues that men struggle with, or other keynote speakers that are just really solid, that deal with particular areas that deal with men. I mean, sometimes we bring in one of the great athletes, or we'll bring in a great sportsman, like a world acclaimed bowsman, and he comes in and shoots his bow and arrow across the platform. Those men get a kick out of it. I mean, it's just marksman. So we do different things like that, and it's really made a difference. Through it, I've written 2 books, and it's just hard to believe now. Time's flown by and it's all added up. But now I'm north of 30 books that I've authored. But the number 1 requested book I've ever written is Demolishing Strongholds, predicated on a true story of a man that through adultery chose to take his life, leaving his wife and 8 children. So to tell that story, they wanted me to tell it, but it took 9 contracts. The 8 kids and the mom, they wanted me to tell it. They had to sign a contract to, never come back on the publisher or on me for telling it. So it's true, but if we don't demolish our strongholds, often they demolish us. And that's become a greater issue. Almost every week, you all being with Baptist paper, almost every week when you read an article in a Baptist paper, somebody's being charged with some type of sexual charge. And so we want to try to deal with those issues. So that's what I'm going to deal with this year. I'm going to deal with the hunt for the precious life. Men need to be on the offensive when it comes to their own moral purity, because I think there's a target on the life of a man or a woman that chooses to be a very godly person. Proverbs 6:26 says that an immoral person will hunt for the precious life, which the Hebrew word is an ambush. There's an ambush set. I need to know. And so being a Native American, I have a lot of fun telling those type stories about ambushes, because the cavalry was always out to get us Indians. So anyway.
I'm sure your stories are very entertaining too.
Yeah. So got to make it interesting. Make sure they're listening.
Well, how do you find that topic? I mean, there's so many options every year, and how do you decide this is the topic for this year to meet whatever need?
Yeah, by doing Timothy Barnabas, being with pastors, and sometimes they're key lay people. One of the leadership statements I wrote in my first book is, if you'll listen to people, they'll tell you what's important. And so in conversations, you just hear ladies saying, I've got an appointment tomorrow morning to try to help, a couple of great influence in Atlanta that are struggling in their marriage, but because they've heard me before, they reached out to me. So, I'm going to meet the husband and try to speak into his life. But the women are telling me, hey, here's what my husband's struggling with. So, we know the stats on pornography, but they need to hear. We live in a generation that no longer is it what you want to talk about, it's why you're dealing with this subject. So, I mean, it's with our children. When I was coming up, my dad said, take out the trash. And I took the trash out. I didn't say why. If we said it then, when we got up, we took it out. They knocked us down. But today, it's a lot of that. It's no longer about just what you should do, but what's the motive? Why do I have to do this? So when I teach now, I deal a lot with the application of, why this? Like I'm going to be dealing this year with the hunt for the precious life, and I'm going to deal with the enemy wants to rob you. But I'm going to deal 3 major truths about, let me tell you what you will be robbed of if you go down this road. And so you're giving, caution signs, stoplights of really, and then you put them in a context too, that First Corinthians 10:13. I try to get men to memorize scripture, but there's no temptation taken us, but such is common to all. So a good translation would be, if you're struggling with it, there are millions of others, but the enemy wants to isolate you. And that's where COVID's done a number on our church. So many people have been isolated and they've not been, with community and with worship and with, genuine koinonia. And so the church has suffered. It's going to take us a while to build back what we've lost during this time. So you just listen and you just hear them. So like last year, over and over again, men kept saying, I wish you would write something. I know you got a book, but just write the heart of the book on demolishing strongholds. So I've done that. And a lot of times it bleeds over into my Timothy Barnabas. I'm almost teaching the same lessons because the pastors are struggling with the same thing their people are struggling with. So,
well, speaking of pastors and lay people, do you have any sense of analytics on your men's conference? How many are ministers? How many are lay people? Kind of the ages, the locations. You've mentioned several states. Have you looked into those numbers and those stats at all?
Yeah, I don't have anything in front of me, but yeah, a lot of the men every year will get 100 calls just saying, "Hey, is my 15-year-old son, is he old enough you going to say anything he shouldn't hear?" And I'm thinking, first of all, I will guarantee I won't say anything he doesn't already know. And you might have asked that question with some innocence 30 years ago, but with the internet, are you kidding me? I mean, you got to bring them if they're 10 years old. So it's really changed. But so the room will have a large number of younger guys there. And then doing it 30 years, guys will come up now and say, "Hey, I came the first time when I was 12 and they're 42,
Wow.
it just kind of say, oh my stars, somebody's aging, and it flew by. But yeah, they're every age. And really, I remember hearing James Dobson interview Dr. Robert Whitehurst, and they were talking about, just struggles, moral and immoral struggles in their life and temptation and thought life. And I remember he said, Dr. Whitehurst, when do men quit struggling? He said, I'm 70 and I still struggle, so I don't know. And if you read the reformers or any of the great preachers and teachers of old, they always talk about the older we get, the more we realize our own propensity for evil in our heart. I mean, it's still true. The part of us that Jesus Christ did not redeem is our flesh. And all you can do is bury it one day, So we have this redeemed Christ in us, this new nature. And some people feel the old was eradicated, but nobody would believe the flesh was eradicated. If that were true, none of us would have the propensity to sin, but we all do. So it's a choice. And we deal a lot on the positive side, what can we do to safeguard our heart? Say, here's where you are and where you want to continue to be. What are some safeguards? What are some things to look out for? And so guys like those how-to messages. So we give them a lot and they keep coming back. So we're grateful.
Why do you think they do keep coming back?
I think, normally if I'm helped with something, I love for somebody else to be helped.
Mm.
If I know of something, hey, you've got to read this book, or hey, I went to a conference, you've got to go with me next year. And I think that's still happening. So these guys, I've got a video, I could literally send it to you. It just came this morning. And they were saying, we did a 4.5-minute video, and it's the Hispanic community. They said our first trip up from Hollywood, Florida, was with 12 men in 2004. So now we're 18 years later, and they're bringing like 45 this year. And what they did is they walked through and showed graphics of the names. They even, told me, and I thought it was so cool. I thought, I can't believe y'all are doing this. I will definitely recognize them at the conference. So they're flying in or driving in or busing in from everywhere. And I think it also speaks of the great need. Even though they're with that group, a lot of them haven't come clean yet. And what we really talk about is confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that you may be healed. So what you need to do is an accountability. You need to find another man and just say, hey, I'm ready to really get right. So what we've nurtured in the dark and seems so precious in the dark, if you bring it to the light, God exposes it for what it really is. It's kind of like the person who has a secret sin, and the Bible talks about how sweet it is, but then once it's exposed, it's like gravel in your mouth. I mean, get a picture of that. How did it go from sweet to gravel in your mouth? And what is it about the conscience being awakened once a person is caught in a particular sin? It's kind of Randy Alcorn saying that 5 seconds after we die, we'll know exactly how we should have lived. And people that are piddling with sin, that think, this isn't that bad, or everybody does it, once they're genuinely exposed, then they're overwhelmed. So guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. This is what is going to issue from your life if you don't stop. So the more we can deal with biblical text to show that and to help them, and they feel they can be helped, they're just going to keep coming back. If I were in a room and there were equal number of men and women, and I taught a lesson and there was a lot of interest, and I said, I've got it in book form or DVD form, 90% of the women would get the book and 90% of the men would get the video. Men don't read. They can be better if they read. So I really deal a lot. I was raised by a single mom in a government project, welfare recipients. Dad checked out when I was 7, quit school at 16, managed a pool room 4 years. A lot of people say they feel my effectiveness comes because I've been where those jokers are. I lived where they live. And yet now I'm on this other side, asking them to come and join me. So I think it really gets their attention, because a guy can come in, he's never laid eyes on me, and he says, here's this preacher. I bet his daddy was a preacher, and, and on and on and on. And then they hear my story of being where they were, and, being arrested 3 times before I was 18 years old. Nothing I'm proud of, but it can become a connect point with someone that's setting out there that maybe admires what they see we've been a part of, but they don't know our journey that got us there. But then to be able to tell what brought about the change, so.
And that brings me to a question that has been noodling in my mind. People might look at you, Brother Johnny, and think you're pretty close to sainthood, given the ministry that you've had and the stature that you have, not only in the Southern Baptist world, but in the entire Christian world. Do you find it helpful even now to be transparent and say, I still have struggles and I'm not perfect?
Yeah. One of the things they'll say, like I wrote a book on unspoken, what men won't talk about and why. And you would not believe the women that send me letters and say, why did you say what men struggle with? Because you have to choose an audience. But I've been interviewed on national television, and it was interviewed by 2 women. And then we did Facebook Live, and the women were it was encouraging, but they were pretty much rebuking me. This is what women need to read too. Lord, we struggle with these things, but it helps us to understand our husbands. So, but I really just imagined unspoken. If you were in a church service and you were to say, got any prayer requests, you'd get a few. But if you'd say any unspoken requests, almost every hand goes up. So here's what I ask. what is it that their hand represents that they can't mention? And I started thinking about those things, that you're just not going to stand at my prayer meeting and say, hey, man, I am really struggling with lust. I mean, they wouldn't even said among men, much less than a mixed group. So if I can address what they won't speak about, unspoken, and even deal why we don't talk about our struggles. Now, women do. You ladies, y'all curled each other's hair and told every secret. Men don't do that. So one thing Promise Keepers help do is to bring about this accountability where we would find camaraderie and a brotherhood, where we would get dead level honest with each other, what we're struggling with. And then, being hold each other accountable. The next week when we come together, hey, how are you doing with that? Are you finding much victory over it? And share with the others what where you found victory. So we really try to do this. So one of the breakouts is normally around the area of accountability and how to form a group in your church too. So when they leave there from another church, we feel like we gave them something they can continue to process where they are. But in my books, I'll tell stories through the years of where great temptation came, and that how I had to struggle, that I felt I would like to do this. But then I knew, along with Joseph, that the vision and the dream God gave me would be dead. And so that became a point of purity in my life. But I wanted to let them know that it's still there. Like, there's that question, and we could debate it and talk about it. But like, was Jesus, since he was tempted, could Jesus sin? And I love to deal with the theology of that. But let me just put it in humanity. Every person can sin. We're all shocked when we hear of the greats that fall. But Adrian Rogers told me one time, Johnny, don't you ever get focused on those stars that fall, because when you see a falling star, it really gets your attention. But no, there's billions that remained right where God placed them. And that's always been an encouragement to me. So we deal with like our own struggles. So normally men will write and say, thing that draws me back is your transparency. Instead of me up here like saying, okay, I've graduated, boys. I'm in this sainthood, and hey, I don't even deal with what y'all deal with, but let me tell you how I dealt with it when I did. No, it's still a struggle. Jeremy, that followed me, he's been under my ministry kind of nurturing since he was 17. So he's 40 today. We're best friends. He's like my son. He says next to his dad, never had anybody in his life like me. But he wrote me the other day and just so sincerely said, I am so grateful to God for your transparency. He said, I feel like I struggle so much with my sanctification. And he said, but what helps me is that you're so much further along and you've not blown it, but you do say you struggle. And I said, yeah, I mean, and just name it, check. So when you can share that, but what you're doing to continue to realize victory. So, yeah.
I'm thinking about all the churches out there who have a heart for reaching men and wanting men to be serving and just all that you've been talking about. But they may not have a platform like you do. How would you suggest for the average everyday church out there who wants to make a difference in men's ministry? What are some tips you would share?
Yeah, I think a lot of them do reach out to us. I think a lot of them come and start with us. And then they even write us and say, hey, thank you. You laid the groundwork for us. We're doing our own now. Or they can come and see us. See, out of mine, two ministries was born. City of Refuge, which gets international attention, where we bring hurting vocational ministers that have either, sometimes it's burnout, sometimes it's immorality, sometimes it's financial impropriety. And we have a full counsel ministry where we care for them. But out of that, and I've dealt with it, God is my witness, twice already this week, trying to help people I don't even know, with staff I don't know, or churches I don't know, but they're calling, and we have a ministry called Hope Quest. And it became such a, it's just such a hard ministry. We had to take it out from under the church because of insurance purposes. We have two people that killed themselves in it. but it's, really struggling with life's addictions. I mean, deep addictions. I mean, 40-year addictions that's just ruining families. And so it's a in-house treatment center, and it's huge. So sometimes they can go to City of Refuge, but sometimes they've been in it so deeply. And most people, when they come looking for help, they really need greater help than they're telling you. And once you begin, as they say, peel the onion, and they feel they're in a safe environment, then they think, I'm ready to really deal with all of this. And sometimes the wife said, I'm so glad my husband's there. We begin to peel the onion, and the wife's got much deeper issues than the husband. I mean, it's so again, when you see this, and you don't have to ever say a name. I'd never do that. But I constantly, when I'm teaching, I can say, hey, one of the leading missionaries I've ever met in my life struggled and made these bad choices. And we say it for one reason, to help them realize they're not alone. Or they're not carnal, just ungodly. And what has happened to them does not have to define them. That's a big statement, because the enemy would like to just say, you're this, and just label you. But you're wrong does not have to define you. The prodigal son can come home, and the father welcomes him.
How can church staff members and church members walk alongside someone who ends up finding themselves in a situation where they're going to have to step away from their ministry? They have, quote, fallen, but they are seeking restoration. How can that work and not be awkward, but at the same time be appropriate? And any tips there?
Yeah, there's so much I can do, but I've got to have a ministry of professionals that really know how to go deeper. I mean, all my studies in theology, not psychology. I'm dealing with how their soul can get saved. They're dealing with how their soul can get healthy after they're saved. But what we would do is we always can recommend a ministry. If somebody calls Woodstock, we can always say, you know what, you're in the Memphis area. Here's 3 different ministries that you could involve them in, help them to get involved in. But then also we can help you to know some materials to use to form an accountability group where you can be part of their journey. Like, I don't want to just pass people off. It'd be easy tomorrow morning, this man that needs to meet me, I could easily just say, hey, I'm not at Woodstock anymore. Or I could say, I'm not a professional in that area. But I mean, he's got marriage struggles. I've been married 51 years. I know a lot. My wife would say, not as much as you need to know, but I know a lot. And so I'm going to speak to him out of the well of my own experience and my biblical knowledge to try to help him. But you got to have a want to. So if somebody's got a want to, again, they could go to Woodstock and see some of the ministries and hear some of the people teach that would help nurture them, to be able to begin to start that type ministry. Because in my early days, somebody used to put it this way: there's a broken heart on every pew. And there really is, but there's serious issues. Everybody's dressed up. Everybody's, in their best behavior. And sometimes you can feel like, gosh, I'm being a little harsh in some of this stuff I'm dealing with, but not so. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, what's going on in that man's heart, what that lady is contemplating. And when we go in with a word from the Lord and a real touch from God to say, these are the issues that are corroding our nation and our churches, and then you begin to delineate what those are and the damage they can do and the help we can offer, you get a lot of attention.
Well, so much has occurred over these past 30 years, and your conference might be where you never even dreamed it would be at this point. What do you see as the future of the men's conference?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what I'd really like to do is, like, even my Timothy Barnabas, a year before I even contemplated doing the move to NAM, I gave Timothy Barnabas to the North American Mission Board for posterity's sake. If the numbers keep adding up, I'm going to die. I checked the other day and it's still 100%. It gets all of us. So I'd like for that, since I've put, this is my 28th year of Timothy Barnabas. So I'd like for that to continue. And honestly, it's stronger than ever. Everything I'm doing is sold out with long waiting lists. no exaggeration. And that's pastors and wives. And I'm doing all over the nation now. But in the men's ministry, we're already talking on our 30th anniversary. They would like for me to kind of take a couple years, and then Jeremy really is passionate about it. And that, but he's got to be able to own it in his own heart. And if he does, I'll just loan it, just give it to him and let it become, right now it's the Johnny Hunt Men's Conference. It could become the Jeremy Morton Men's Conference, or it could just be Woodstock, so known for it. And then what I would do is let him take over, and I just come in and speak once if he'd like for me to kind of stay connected and continue to help draw the people that I, have grown old with. That's the thing. Any pastor, you hear people every now and then saying, man, I went to hear David Jeremiah, and gosh, it's amazing how many white hairs there are there. The church ages with its pastor. The church age. So if I'm there 33 years, I was 34 years old when I showed up at Woodstock. I used to be always the youngest person on the platform. Now we've got a veteran pastor and no introduction needed. He came over with Noah on the ark, So anyway, but yeah, I hope that they will continue, and I've still got energy for it, vision for it, passion is long, and they want to host it. Why wouldn't they want to host an event that, helps so many men?
Well, and that matches with your whole theme of what you've done with mentoring and bringing along the next generation. So that would just fall right in line.
Yeah, y'all keep up with me too well. Yeah, so
mentored
two a year for 25 years, and I've been interviewed on that this week. And as I was being interviewed, I just kind of dropped names, and they said, "Oh my God, you interviewed John?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh, I know. What a wonderful." And I thought, yeah, I met him when he was a 9th grader. And then when he graduated from Liberty, he came in, and you mentored Vance Pittman. Vance started 70 churches and getting ready to join NAM and out in Vegas. And Michael Katz's successor, I mentored him 18 years ago and planted him in Las Vegas. I was in his church 2 weeks ago. So it's really kind of neat that God lets you look back. And I even try to say to the men, if you're not investing in your life when you get to my age, you'll think, what have I done? You know what I mean? What have I done with my life? 90-year-olds were asked if they could live life over again, what would they do differently? And one of the major answers was, I would invest more in that which will outlast me. Well, the greatest resource you invest in is another human being, because everything else is passing away. But we're going to live forever somewhere. So
good or bad, right? So
exactly.
Investing for eternal purposes would definitely be the way to go.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a reason Purpose-Driven Life is the #1 selling book of all times. People really are wondering what is their purpose in life, and so that's it.
Well, Johnny, thank you so much. So congratulations on 30 years.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it. Thank y'all for being so interested. What a joy to be interviewed by ladies on a men's conference. That's encouraging.
It was fun.
If those ladies that did my Facebook show, if they see this, they'll think we're not the only ones trying to get this guy, straight. So
well, we'll put information about how to connect with the conference and other opportunities with Johnny Hunt in the show notes. Thank you.
Good. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a blessed day.